So today we're going to be talking about domains, and we're going to be talking about how to set up, how to troubleshoot, and how to make sure that your records in your DNS are pointing to where they need to point. So a basic overview agenda is you have Fez and I presiding over this webinar. I'll be moderating and answering any questions that I can via the chat. While Fez is presenting the masterclass, he's going to be going over topics from the basic, what is a domain, to a domain versus a subdomain, to the more advanced topics like the 301 redirects, level 1.0 insights, the membership course domains, how to white label your desktop app, your API domain. WordPress domains is where we're going to focus a little heavily in, just because there's a lot that goes on in there. And then we're going to be doing some basic troubleshooting scenario and a 15-minute brief Q&A session for the questions that I wasn't able to answer in chat. If it's a great question, then I say, hey, we're going to ask that in the troubleshooting section. That would be a more advanced type of question that we might want to invest a little more time into. But this is basically the premise. Everything domain related is covered here. There's only one caveat to that, or one exception, which is mailgun domains. That's going to be coming in another future webinar. So no worries there. But if you have questions about that, you can still feel free to ask, and I'll assist as best as I can. From here on out, this is going to be Fez, who's going to be taking on the rest of the slides.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. This is Fez from High Level. And today, as Jeremy explained, we are going to be covering how to set up domains, and then we are also going to go do some troubleshooting about domains. Now, before we jump into what domains are and how do we use them, I just would like to point out that with High Level, we have different domains. For example, you have different domains for funnels and websites. Then we have different domains for memberships, for your white label desktop app, API domain. Then there's your mailgun domain, and then WordPress domains. Now, each of these has its own setup, and we are just going to be having a brief overview of what these are, what they do, and how do we set them up. All right. Now, before we even look at the setup, I would just like to give a brief overview of how a domain even works. What do you need to get started with your own personal domain, and how do you set that up? Okay, so I'd like you to think of your domain as your street address. So every house, every office, each place has its own address. Just like that, every website has its own domain. So you can correlate to that, and we'll take that this example further, and we'll see how that works. So let's just start from the scratch and see how you would go about setting up your domain. So the first thing you got to do is you got to own a domain. What that means is you want to own whatever your branding name is. For example, the case that I'm going to show, I have a domain that I've named fezbucket.com. So let's just see how did I even get the domain. So I went to GoDaddy. GoDaddy is a domain provider. You can use Google Domains, or you can use any other tool. For example, we have Namecheap that offers domains. So in my case, I went to GoDaddy. I bought the domain called fezbucket.com. Now my domain registrar, that's GoDaddy. And whatever I'm supposed to set up, I'll always go to GoDaddy, and I'll always make sure that I have the right settings so that I can connect my domain to whatever it is, whether it's a website, it's memberships, etc. Okay, now one important thing before we move forward is that just like one street address belongs to one specific house or office or location, just similar to that, one domain can only point to one website. But yeah, you can have different subdomains pointing to different websites. However, one domain can only it can only point to one website host, meaning that if you're using your domain with High Level, you cannot use it at the same time with WordPress as well. Yeah, you can use a different subdomain, but you cannot have the same domain pointing to multiple website hosts, because that's commonly an issue that we get from customers. Okay. Now, to explain this further, actually, let's just assume you order pizza, and the pizza guy comes to your street address. Now, when he reaches the street address, there are two houses or two offices right there. How would the pizza guy know where to deliver the pizza? That's exactly what happens when you're pointing your domain to more than one servers at the same time. The DNS, which we'll talk about later, that does not know where to go, the first server or the second one, whether it needs to go to high level or WordPress. That's why we cannot use the same domain with more than one website host at the same time. Okay, now let's just jump more into how the domain works, what happens when someone types into the browser. For that, I have this, sorry, let me open the slideshow again. I have this little figure that shows what happens. So you open Chrome on your browser and you type gohighlevel.com. The first thing that happens is the browser goes to domain name system, that is the DNS. It goes to DNS and it tells, hey, this person wants to visit gohighlevel.com. Now, what DNS does is it then goes to wherever gohighlevel.com is pointing. And where would you set that? That would be, in my case, it would be in GoDaddy. So DNS would go to GoDaddy. It would ask, hey, where is gohighlevel.com pointing? And it would get the server name or address, whatever it is. And then DNS will go to that server. It will tell that server, in our case, high level server, to just give back whatever website is connected to gohighlevel.com. A server is going to give gohighlevel.com's homepage to DNS, and DNS is going to give that back to the web browser. Like, browser does not know itself where gohighlevel.com is pointing. That's where DNS comes into action. And that's why we need to set up DNS records so that DNS knows where to go whenever your domain is typed inside the browser. I hope that makes sense. Now, we'll talk about what is a domain and then what is a subdomain. So domain.com, or in my case, fezbucket.com or gohighlevel.com, that's a domain. You can also call it the root domain. Anything that comes before that, for example, www or a site or app.gohighlevel.com, these are all subdomains. Now, whatever keyword you put before your root domain becomes that subdomain. And yes, even www is not considered your main domain. It's only a subdomain, and we'll dive into that concept later in the upcoming slides. Okay, and that's the same concept. You cannot use the same domain with multiple servers, but you can use different subdomains of the same domain with different with more than one servers. That's allowed. And we'll also have a look at that further when I set that up using my domain that I have in GoDaddy. Okay. Moving on to the next slide. So now we're just going to jump into how we set up our Go High Level funnel and website domain records. And for that, the first thing that we need to know is we can either set up, first thing we need to do is whenever we have a website, we want to set up our domain, we've got to set up the DNS records. So these are the values. You don't need to remember these, because when you go and set it up, you'll see it in the settings as well. And I'll just show you what I mean. However, if you want to set up CNAME record, you're supposed to set up pointed to flash.funnels.messagesender.com. If it's an A record, that's the value that you are supposed to point it to. Just remember that you can only add one domain, like one domain can only be added to one agency. For example, you own more than one agencies with a high level, you cannot add the same domain to more than one agencies at the same time. Okay, now before I jump into what a default page is, I'd like to point out that whenever you connect any domain, whether it's with memberships or WordPress or with your funnels, websites, whatever it is, SSL generation is always handled by high level. So you don't have to buy a SSL certificate when you buy your domain with high level. We take care of that for you. Okay, now what's the default page? Well, why don't we look at a live example and see what that is? So just give me a moment. Okay, I'm gonna go into my agency account and let's look at a live example. In this example, I have a website with Go High Level, and what I want to do is I want to connect it with my domain. So what I need to do is I need to go to settings and I need to add a domain here. So it's already added, so I can just remove that so that we can start from scratch. Just a second. Okay. Now, I want to set up my domain with this website. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into settings. These settings, or I can also navigate to settings from the left menu, then go inside domains. And what I would like to do is I would like to point it to my domain, which I would call website.fezbucket.com. So now what happens if I try to add this right away? Let's just give it a moment, see what happens. Meanwhile, oh, it's been added successfully. What happened at the backend was that for my domain, I managed the DNS records inside Cloudflare, even though I bought it with GoDaddy, and I'll explain the concept later, so no need to get confused. But when I bought my domain from GoDaddy, I felt that Cloudflare is better. So I just moved the domain over to Cloudflare just by changing the name servers. If it's too technical, just forget it. The main thing is my domain's DNS records are managed by Cloudflare. So what happened at the backend was I added a record right there, and let's just do it live. So let's just take a new subdomain. For example, I'll just take demo. And what I need to do to point it to high level is copy high level's funnel server values. Like whenever you add a domain, it tells you if you want to set up an A record, you'll copy this value. If you want to set up a CNAME record, you'll copy this value. So you need either a CNAME or an A record. I'll just copy the A record value. I'll go here and I'll add this here. Now, another important thing to note, and we'll talk about this again as well, is since I'm using Cloudflare, I'll make sure that proxy is off. That's only a Cloudflare thing. If you don't have Cloudflare, don't worry about that. And we'll talk about it later when troubleshooting. Why do we need to turn off proxy? However, now that I've set it up, if I go back into my agency, I should now be able to add demo.fezbucket.com here. Just hit the add button. Okay, perfect. Now that it's added, I can select the funnel or website for my domain. I want to connect it to this. And now it also asks me for a default step. What a default step means, we'll look at it later, but for now, I'm going to set homepage as the default page. Sorry, water break, just a second. Okay, let's just give it a while to load. So meanwhile, while it's doing that, why don't I just actually, it read my mind. So it's right there. Now that we have connected it to our funnel, I'll go back. Sorry, website. Now I am in my website at this moment. And if I check the settings, it is connected to demo.fezbucket.com. Now, if I open any of these pages, I'm connected this for the first time, so it took a few seconds to load because at the back end, it's generating the SSL. Remember, I told you that we take care of SSL generation. So for the first time, whenever you connect a domain, it just takes a few seconds to generate the SSL. But now that it's done, if I try and preview another page, it should only take a few seconds to load. So yeah, right there. Now, that's the only thing that you need to do. Now your domain is all set, and whatever page you like to load, it will load up with your domain name. And where is it getting the path from? That's inside funnel settings, sorry, the website settings. So if I go into the settings for this page, I'm calling it services. So whenever I go to my domain /services, it's going to go to this web page right there. Okay, another thing that I want to show you, what if I enter a wrong path? I just enter services 1, 2, 3, 4. Will it give me something? No, it would result in a 404. So if you ever get a 404 issue, it means that the system could not find that path. And you just need to go and set up that path if you want it to work. All right. Coming back to the concept of default page. So I set up home page as my default page, remember. Now, what does that mean? It means that whenever I open my domain without any path in front of it, like I simply type demo.fastbucket.com, it should open up the home page, and it just did. Let's just open it in a new tab. Yeah, it loads my home page. So that's what default page means. So if you were wondering, hey, I don't want to show anything in front of, like I don't want to show any path, I just want demo.mydomain.com to load that page, you would go into settings and you would select the right default page, and that would open up whenever someone opens your domain without a path. All right, let's go to the next topic. Okay, 301 redirects. Before we jump into what redirects are and why do we even need them, I showed you this example in which we use a subdomain, but mostly people want to use their main domain. For example, my main domain, I call it www.fastbucket.com. So I don't want to use demo, I want to use this. But there is something that you need to do along if you want to use your root domain and www version. There are a few additional settings which you have to do. And we would learn that just in a second. So I'm going to save this right here. And now if I open up www.fastbucket.com/home, loads totally fine, no issues there, right? But what if I remove www and hit enter? Yeah, that's not working. It results in an issue. This is one of the biggest issues that we've seen reported with domains. And this is a pretty simple concept to learn. Your root domain and your www domain are two different domains. They don't have the same setup. In order to make them both work with the same website, you would need to set up a redirect, because inside funnel settings, there is no option to select more than one domain, right? You can either use the www version, or you can use the non-w, or you can use a subdomain. So both domains won't work the same, because www is not the same as the non-w version of my domain. Now, what do I need to do? I can either, and we have a help article for that as well, and we'll share that with you later. But the first thing that I can do is, if I'm using Google domains or if I'm using Cloudflare, they both give a native option to set up a redirect at their end. So for example, if I go to Cloudflare, I can add, first I'll make sure that my domain, or we can use add for root. First, I'll make sure that it's pointing to my web go high level. So, and in this case, again, you don't have to remember all of this, but since I'm forwarding from non-www to www, that's a Cloudflare thing explained in the article as well. I'll keep the proxy on this time because this is being used for redirecting. Okay. If it's too technical, just forget about it. But I'm just trying to do a demo, so then we'll move on to a better option if you don't want to do this. Okay. Now, now that I have my proxy set up, the next thing that I need to do with Cloudflare is I need to go into the rules and I need to set up a rule. In this case, I already have it set up. So I can just edit that and show you. Cloudflare allows you to forward domains. Now I'm forwarding my root domain to, and I selected the forwarding URL 301 redirect. I'm forwarding it to www.mydomain.com. And what's that $1? That means that whatever the path is with it, for example, I typed in www.fastbucket.com/home. So the non-www version would forward to this. If it's too technical, forget about it. This is all explained in an article. You just need to follow step by step what's written over there, so you don't have to worry about that. However, now that I have my redirect set up, this should start working fine. Now, remember, I only set it up like a couple of minutes ago, the record, so it might not be propagating yet. However, in a few minutes, this should start working. So that's the first way to do the redirect. Again, you cannot have www and non-www both working. So you have to, with the same website, so you have to set up a redirect. That's the concept. Cloudflare allows you to do that using page rules. Google domain has a better, simpler option to do that. But what if you don't want to use Cloudflare, you don't want to use Google Domains? Most of the people just use GoDaddy, right? The answer is it's not possible to do this directly inside GoDaddy. So we came up with a feature which is inside settings that's called URL redirects. Using this feature, you can forward each page one by one. So that's the only drawback for now. You have to do this for each page individually. And how would I do that? I would add a redirect right there. And first I have to add my root domain right here. So I'll go into settings and I'll go into domains. Let's just do the root real quick. Let me have my root domain. Oh, sorry, I was using Cloudflare and I cannot add my record since it's set to proxied. So I'll turn off the proxy status. And then just give it a moment. And then if I add it again, it should add fine without any errors. Yeah, perfect. Now, if I go into URL redirects, let's just do this for the homepage so that you have an idea what you need to do. If you are not using Cloudflare, you're not using Google Domains, you want to use this feature, you have to add a redirect. Now I want to redirect from the non-www domain. So whenever someone enters fastbucket.com/home, I want them to go to, I can either add the whole URL here, which is going to be this, or I can simply say my website, this one. Okay. Now that it's done, perfect. So it's forwarding to the www version. That's how you can use the native redirects. Wait, it was working. Let's just give it a second, sorry. DNS, what's the issue? Oh, it's DNS propagation, sorry. So I just added the DNS record like a couple of minutes ago, or maybe 3 minutes. It takes up to 30 minutes. It can sometimes take up to a couple of hours to propagate. So these problems happen initially when you set up a DNS record. And that's another good point. Whenever you add a DNS record, just make sure you give it enough time to propagate fully so that you can see it working, see it in action. And we'll learn how to see if it's working or not from kind of the back end as well in the troubleshooting section. For now, let's just go to the next topic. I mean, we saw how we can set up redirects. And the only thing it's going to do is when I enter this without www, it's going to forward to the www version. Okay. Just a second. Level 0 insights. Well, I want to focus on what level 0 even is. Now, we just saw how we can point our website to flash.funnels.msgsndr.com, but we came up with a recent update that's called the level 0 update. And the concept is that we're using Google CDN for faster load times because Google CDN has amazing load speeds. It's a beta feature. So yeah, if you point your website to level 0, remember that all the new updates are first going to be pushed or published to level 0, and then they're going to go live on the Flash.funnels. So let's just see how we can start using that. You want to use Google CDN? Okay, fine. Just move your website over from Flash.funnels to level 0. How you can do that is this is the value that you want to set your DNS record to. So I'll go here and now I'll just change the demo page, sorry, to level 0. So instead of pointing it to this flash.funnels, I'll point it to level 0, but this is an A record. A records can only point to IP addresses. I need to use CNAME record instead. What I'll do is I'll delete this record. And then I'll add a new one. Make sure it's not proxied since I'm using Cloudflare. Give it a moment. And then if I go into the settings and go into domains, yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention level 0 is only for your funnels and websites. So if you add a domain, you will add the domain just like you did for funnels and websites before. And an additional thing to note is, if I'm assuming that, hey, my domain is already there, now that I've updated the record to level 0, it should automatically start propagating, pointing to level 0. That's not going to happen. You'll actually have to first go and delete the domain and then add that back again so that our system knows that you've updated everything on the back end. Okay, now I can point it to my website again. Select the default page, same as before. Nothing changed over there. Okay, that's literally it. Like, you just have to update the record at the back end, and then you have to add the domain again, and then you can connect it again with your website, and that's all. So once you reconnect, you need to give it some time for SSL propagation. And normally, like with level 0, it takes at least 30 minutes for the SSL to be generated. So it might not start working right away. So just give it almost 30 minutes and then you should be good to go. Okay, now we'll just learn how to set up membership domains. So I'm going to go back into my agency. If you didn't know, we offer a membership feature as well, where you can sell your online courses, trainings, and all that. So once you have all of that set up, that's kind of a different topic. We're going to learn how we can use our own domain over there as well. So if someone goes to, for example, courses.fezbucket.com, that's my personal branded domain. They see my courses that I'm offering to them, or whatever I've granted them, all the offers that I have for them. So how do we use a domain for membership? First, we're going to go into membership settings. And then before I show you the custom domain setup, sorry, I have to give you some additional info as well. If you don't own a domain, if you don't want to do the setup yourself, don't worry, we've got your back. Inside site details, we give you a free subdomain as well. So that if you don't have anything for yourself, you can just use this default subdomain. How that works is, if I load it in a new tab, it's going to be .memberships.mscsndr.com. it's always going to point to my membership portal. So I can change it to my name. For example, I change it to the name of the account is Bob's Burgers. So let me just change it to Bob's Burgers. What will happen is, whenever someone goes to Bob's Burgers .memberships.mscsndr.com, they're going to be pointing to my personal membership course, membership portal, sorry. So that's the free subdomain option that you can use. But now let's jump into the main thing. What if you don't want to use a free one, right? I want to use courses.fezbucket.com. I don't want to use this. What am I supposed to do? If I type courses.fezbucket.com here, excuse me. Okay, if I add this right there, it's not going to work. This is only meant to be for the subdomain, so I can only add one single keyword here. For example, just courses, right? So where do I add my main domain? For that, I go back into the settings and I'll go into custom domains. This is where you're supposed to add that. And before adding any domain, you have to make sure you point either an A record or a CNAME record. So in this case, I'll just set up a CNAME real quick. I'll go into Cloudflare where I manage my DNS records. So I'm going to use courses, keep the proxy off, add the record, give it a while, and then hope that works. If the DNS is propagating, then it would be added. Yeah, perfect. So custom domain updated. If I go to courses.fezbucket.com, it's going to point to my membership portal. And all the offers and products from now on are going to use this domain. Privacy error. Yeah, SSL generation is going to take a few minutes. Okay, now let's move to the next thing, white label desktop app. White labeling concept, if you're not aware, if you're reselling high level to your clients, and you don't want them to find out what app.gohighlevel.com is, you can use your own custom domain instead of using app.gohighlevel.com. How do you do that is you go to the agency view and then go into the agency settings. Here inside the company settings, we have a section for white label domain, and there's the link to the help article, which will show you what records you need to have set up. This is the article, and it tells you that you need to have a CNAME record for your domain. For example, I want to use app.fastbucket.com or maybe login.fastbucket.com. First, I need to create a DNS record for that. So I'll go into Cloudflare, I'll add a record. Let's just call it login.fastbucket.com. And yeah, this is a CNAME, proxy off. Oops, I think I'm already using login. Yeah, so I cannot set up another one for that. What if I use web.fastbucket.com. Now, this is my white label agency where I want to use this domain. So if I now enter, sorry, what's it called? web.mydomain.com, and just a second. Yeah, I have to hit update company. Now, whenever someone goes to web.fastbucket.com, they should be able to view my logo, my privacy policy URL, and my custom terms and conditions URL. Let's take a look. And again, it's the first time, so SSL generation takes a while. Let's see if this has started working yet. Yeah, not yet. Okay, so it's loading, and yeah, here's the logo that I had set in my agency view. So yeah, it's pointing to my custom domain now. So whoever is a member of my agency can now use this link to log in. So that's the white labeling concept. And here's the article. We are going to share all the articles with you at the end of this webinar, so don't worry about that. Now let's move to the next part. Another cool thing that I want to show you is the API domain. First, let's see what the API domain even means. So inside your agency, if you go into, let's just use this agency. If I go into any sub account and I open any calendar, a form, a survey, or if I send out any trigger link, all of them use a specific domain. So if I do not have the API domain set up, they're going to always point to api.leadconnectorhq.com. Now, I want to use my own custom domain here as well. How do I change that? That's where API domain comes into actions. API domain works for all your widgets, for example, calendars, forms, surveys, your trigger links, review links. So all of these will be custom branded with your own custom domain. All you have to do is point your domain to link.msgsndr.com or messagesender.com. I think in this case, yeah, I already have a record for link, but I can create another one. Let's just use API, for example. So I want to set up a CNAME record for api.fastbucket.com that points to link.messagesender.com. Keep the proxy off. I'm using Cloudflare. Okay. Again, it can take a couple of minutes to load, to propagate, but once the propagation is done, I'll be able to use the domain right here. Okay, so now if I go back into the sub account and I try to load, excuse me. Yeah, it's still going to take a while to propagate. Once the records are propagated, then this is supposed to start working fine. Let me just quickly refresh this once to make sure that these settings are up to date. However, once the propagation is done and the domain is set, it's going to say api.fastbucket.com/whatever the widget link is. Yep, there we go. So I just had to refresh once. And the first time it's going to take a while again, because SSL generation takes some time. However, that's how you set up the API domain. It's really simple, just a CNAME record pointing to link.mscsndr.com and you're all set. Okay, now last topic of today's webinar is going to be WordPress domains. This is a big one for us. WordPress is a new feature. It's still in beta. We have a lot of people who sometimes have a question, hey, how do I add additional domains to my WordPress website? So this is going to be a live demo of how that works. Basically, we have divided the WordPress domain setup into two parts. You have to set up two DNS records. And the only reason for that is most of the people who use our WordPress feature have an already existing website. So for example, I'm using blog.fezbucket.com. It's already, I have it with a different WordPress server and I want to use it with high level, but I want to make sure that I test things out first. And when I point blog.fezbucket.com to high level, there is no downtime in between. I hope that makes sense. So to prevent the downtime, we've divided this into two parts. What happens is first you create a record for SSL so that because it takes up to 30 minutes for the SSL to be generated. So first I'll just go ahead, I'll create a record for my SSL, and next I will point my domain when the SSL is done after 30 minutes, when I'm sure that, hey, SSL should be done by now, then I'll go ahead and create the second record that will be just like any other records that we've seen right now. And let's just look at a live demo so that it makes more sense to you. Okay, I'm gonna go back into Bob's Burgers location. Okay. Now, if I go into sites and then go into WordPress, that's where I have my WordPress website. Now, if you notice, the main domain setup with this is a staging domain, Bob's Burgers test, yada, yada, yada. I don't want this. I want my custom domain. I want my blog.facebook.com instead of this domain. So what I'll do is I'll just add a domain here. How do I do that? Well, if you scroll down to the domains and subdomains section, you can see the add domain button here. You just go there. And in this example, I want to set up my blog.fezbucket.com. So first thing I'll do is enter the domain name here and then just generate a CNAME. This is the first part. This is SSL generation. So it gives me a key and it gives me a value. If you just don't get confused, all you have to do is copy the key. So in this case, for my blog, it just adds Acme _Acme -challenge. So you have to first go into your DNS area and add a CNAME over there. Now, instead of my blog, I'm setting up the SSL. So I'm doing this for whatever the system gave me. And then the value, you can just copy it. And then since we're using Cloudflare, proxies off, hit save. Excuse me. And then just give it a couple of minutes. Once that's done, make sure to check this box. Just a second. Okay, and then verify and create certificate. It means that you are going to create the SSL certificate for this domain. Yeah, so it was able to detect this record, and it also tells you that certificate is being created. It usually takes around 30 minutes. Do not delete the CNAME record. You have to keep it there for the SSL to work correctly. All you have to do is after 30 minutes, you would create a CNAME record or you would create an A record. So it gives me the value here as well. And or if I just don't copy that value, I can, if I want to point a CNAME, it should go to wp3.msgsndr.com. If I want to do an A record instead, I would do this number. So let's just do an A record. I'll go into my Cloudflare and add an A record over there. It's supposed to be for my blog. DNS off, hit save. Now, normally SSL generation is going to take 30 minutes. So ideally, I would do this after 30 minutes. But let's just try our luck and see what happens. I've pointed it right away. most likely it's not going to work right away because SSL generation takes a while. Yeah. However, I have another example. So I did the same thing for my domain web.fastbucket.com. It's been almost an hour that I set up the SSL. Sorry, the SSL record for it. Now let's go and try to add a DNS record here and see if that works. So I'm pointing web.fastbucket.com to my white label domain. I'll just go ahead and edit this because now I'm going to use it with my WordPress instead. So I'll just change the record and point it to W3 instead. Now, after this is done propagating, it should start working fine. What essentially we want to see is when I go to web.fastbucket.com, it should point to this site because this is my WordPress site. Perfect. So that's what's happening. Now, since I did this, the SSL certificate record a while back, it's been almost an hour. Now, when I pointed my domain there, it starts working just instantly. And that's exactly why we've split this into two parts. The first part is for SSL generation. The second part is for pointing your domain to our servers, to our WordPress servers. So yeah, I hope that makes sense. Now, we'll just see some troubleshooting examples. That's the final part. We're done with seeing how to set things up. Now, what happens? How do you troubleshoot your domains? What if you run into issues while setting this up? Sorry. So the first thing that I do whenever I run into any domain issues is use the DNS lookup tool. You can use any DNS lookup tool that you like. In my case, I use MX Toolbox. This is a really simple tool. You are supposed to open up the DNS lookup. You'll get this text box right there. Enter your domain. What it's going to do, it's going to show you all of your DNS records that you have set up for the domain. And it's also going to show you where you are managing your DNS records. So that's quite helpful. Let's see how. So for example, my blog.fastbucket.com. I want to find out where is this pointing. I'll just type that out and I'll do the DNS lookup. So it shows me where my records are pointing. Now, in case I had this pointing to more than one servers and my domain was not being added to high level, I would be able to tell myself, hey, this domain is not pointing to just one server, it's pointing to more than one values at the same time. That's why high level is unable to recognize that I've added any DNS record. So that's where this tool is pretty useful. The second good thing that it does is now, I bought the domain from GoDaddy, right? I told you that. However, if I set up a DNS record in here and I expect that to work, it's not going to happen because, like I said, I'm pointing my name servers to Cloudflare, and that's the thing with domains. Wherever you point a domain's name servers, that's where you're supposed to manage their DNS records as well, and that's what the DNS lookup tools is also telling me. So it tells me right there, your DNS hosting provider is Cloudflare. So if you're confused as to why you set up your records inside GoDaddy, but it's still not showing up here, is because you might be looking at the wrong place. So the first thing it does is shows you the right records. Second thing, it shows you where you actually need to be looking for your records.
Best.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
While we're using Cloudflare as an example, this is not us endorsing that Cloudflare is the only option. We also want to make it clear that all other options are valid. We don't have that much of a great combo with Wix, but others we're great with. And Cloudflare, we're just discussing it repetitively so that we get the Cloudflare proxy point out there. So it's just one of the many options.
Thank you for that. And I do have a question that we're gonna ask as well later on as soon as we finish this. But before we go on to the question and answer portion of this webinar. We would greatly appreciate any feedback you guys have on the survey for you guys to pick out the next survey topic. I know Jarvis has been in the chat posting it everywhere, but if you guys scan this QR code, it's going to send you to the survey where you can give us your feedback on other webinars and other topics that you want us to discuss. Remember, this is our first webinar ever here with training, and I want to make sure that we curate the webinars based upon you guys. You guys are real drivers. Oh, we do have a couple more questions. And we're going to get to these questions in a little bit. Before I get into the questions, though, I am going to provide you guys a link to the slideshow that we're going through right now, because the documents that I was putting in the chat under to answering some of the questions, and as Fez was going through the slides, I have put them all into this slideshow so that you guys will have the additional resources available to you as soon as I send you guys the link. But there's quite a few articles in there. So issues with setting up or maybe understanding what's being said in the article, you can contact support 24/7. We have chat support available to agency admins by clicking the little question mark. I'm sure I've seen a lot of people in the chats before that are here now. But if you guys do have any questions or any issues with setting up any of the domains that we've discussed today, please don't hesitate to reach us out via chat or phone support. You can reach us 24/7 at 888-732-4197. And our Facebook group, it's our community of other high levelers where if you have a question, maybe another agency has experienced that same issue. I saw it in the chat today. Someone said they were having a 404 error and someone else commented in there saying, hey, I went through the same thing. There's something wrong with your domains. Reach out to support. And I was like, that's exactly what the community we're trying to foster here. And I think we're going to open it back up to questions. So
there is one question I would love Fez to answer right quick, because it was a good question. Hey, Fez, what's the difference between like a sending domain and an MX domain, like for emails and stuff? I've seen that in emails before.
Sorry, come again. Can you elaborate on the question?
The MX domains are like sending domains. And so we didn't cover email domains here, like setting up an MX records or anything. What's the difference between those and why didn't we cover them here?
The only reason we're not covering email domains is because like that's we've got other specialists for that. Like this email domain part is totally different as compared with the domains that we have to set up with WordPress or other builders. So I mean, we're going to have that session again. It's going to be all about Mailgun, how you can set up your Mailgun or other SMTP records. So that's kind of out of the domain of the conversation that we're having today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Wisdom, would you look like you have a question?
Yeah, so it's hi. Well, first, thank you all for this webinar. It's very helpful. You guys are able to hear me well?
yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So maybe this question is to Faye directly, and it's to connect with the questions about emails and MX stuff. Now, you mentioned earlier for using the API.mydomain.com is to use the forms. And as of today, like this morning, I was to use my contact form, and I tried to use it on one of the pages. It did not go through. So I don't receive an email, but it does go to submissions under the forms, under the tab forms.
Got you. Have you said? Yeah. So you're saying that whenever someone submits your form, they're not getting an email, right?
Yeah. So I tried to test it today. Yeah, I don't receive an email when I submit the form.
Got you. The first thing that you want to look at is if you have a workflow set up for that, because ideally you would go to automation workflows, you'll set up a workflow inside that, you'll select the form and the form submission and the triggers, and then you'll create an action to send out an email whenever someone submits the form. So that's kind of without a workflow or a trigger, it won't happen automatically.
Oh, I see. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you so much.
No problem. Hey, Jeff.
So I think there's there's a quick question on the Cloudflare question about
Hey,
knowing.
Chuck.
Yeah.
Chuck,
Yeah.
Would you have a moment? Jeff had his hand raised. Would you mind if he went
Oh,
right quick?
sorry.
It's
No, it's
quite all
okay.
right. I can wait, but thank you. Yeah, it's fine. You
Okay,
can
cool.
go
Thanks
ahead.
so much,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Thanks.
Okay, go ahead, Chuck. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Oh, sorry about that, Jeff. I didn't see
It's
that.
okay.
No problem.
Thank you. Thank you. So on I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube about setting some DNS records to proxy on Cloudflare. And I've also seen some that don't say anything about it. So is there, a thumbs rule as to knowing which are recommended for proxy and which are not?
Sure, yeah. So all of your domains that if you're using Cloudflare and you want to point your to high level, you will never turn on proxy. There's just one exception. When you are using Cloudflare's page rule and you want to forward, let's just say from the root domain to the www domain, that's where you'll need to use Cloudflare's own page rules. That's the only time when you'll use a proxied record. So that's the only exception. Otherwise, you'll never turn it on for high levels, websites or memberships, etc.
So what is there any real value one way or the other to doing the proxy or not doing the proxy?
Sure. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you real quick.
Okay.
In just a second. Let me actually show you what happens if you set it to proxy. So for example, I had proxy turned on right there, and why we cannot use it with high level. So I'm going to the DNS lookup tool, and let's just do a DNS lookup and see what comes up. Now, you see that the system did not, even though I have set it to this IP address, but inside DNS lookup, it shows it is proxied. Cloudflare is like hiding the actual records. That's where it conflicts with high level. High level system is not able to identify whether this domain is pointing to us or not. So that's why we cannot add this domain in our system, because we need to see if it's pointed to our servers or not. That's the confusion that proxy creates. But it's useful to people who want to actually hide their identity. Like I really have no personal use case of having a proxied record for myself, but maybe some security agencies or people who don't want to show where they're pointing their records, that's where proxied record would be useful, because Cloudflare would hide wherever the domain is pointing.
Okay, so in this scenario, unless you want to hide some data, then you never need to turn the proxy for any record in Cloudflare. So it's always visible to high level, right?
That's correct.
I see. So what about the www? That doesn't, the www record, it never needs to be proxied?
It doesn't, unless you're using the redirect again. By the way, we do have an article on that as well, which mentions specifically which record you want to set to proxy when you're setting up a Cloudflare redirect. So that's the only time you will proxy either the root domain or the www version. Otherwise, if you're not using redirects, you don't need to set them to proxy.
Can you please share that article?
For sure. Jeremy, if you'd like to take over, are we going to share these in an email after the webinar?
We are. It should also be in the slideshow that I sent the link to previously, but I can just resend the link to the slideshow. It's in the additional slide section.
Okay. Just a second. I'm going to copy this and share this in the chat as well.
Okay.
And then that's
We're getting close to the end of our time here. I want to make sure we get Jeff's questions answered here.
Okay.
Would that be all right, Chuck?
Well, if you don't mind, Jeff, the last question is I think I forgot. I had a question, but it skipped my mind. So Jeff, just go ahead. If I remember, I'll send it in. Thank you, Jeff.
Sure. Mine might be a little awkward, but I'm going to ask. I've tried to ask it a couple of times in just regular support, but they don't seem to be able to help. So here's the deal. I'm putting 4 sub accounts into GHL, right?
Mhm.
And I want to use one instance of WordPress, but subdomains. For example, location1.tattoo.com, location2.tattoo.com. And I basically want each of those subdomains to resolve at a different home page on the same WordPress site. And I'm pretty sure that I can do that, correct?
Can you explain the last part? Like you said, you want all 4 of them to resolve on the same page?
I'm trying to not make 4 WordPress sites. I just want to do like location1.tattoo.com, location2.tattoo.com. And so but I'm just going to basically copy the home page 4 times and change the information for location 1, location 2, right? And here's where it gets, so that's possible or no?
I mean, from what it sounds to me, it's possible, but I would like you to elaborate again if that's, I'm sorry, I just
Sure.
want to make sure I'm giving you the right answer.
It's going to get more complicated once we get through this. So 4 sub accounts in GHL, right? Let's hold that to the side. In one of the sub accounts, I want to have a WordPress instance and use 4 subdomains, location1.my subdomain, location2.my location3, like that, right? And I'm going to take, and so I want location 1 to resolve at, at one home page. I want location 2 to resolve at a different home page. Does that make sense?
Oh,
it
Fez.
could work with a website or a funnel, but it would not work with WordPress, because if you're talking about the WordPress feature that we just introduced, that's in beta, whichever domain you add there, because you're only going to be having WordPress on one location, correct? Not on all 4 of them.
I mean, it seems I was trying to do it on one, but is there a multi-site capabilities? I guess is really my question. Do you do WordPress multi-site?
Not yet. Every location has only one WordPress instance for now. So all the domains that you add inside the additional domains are all going to point to the same thing. That's how it works for now. What I would suggest you to do is you can point it to our funnel server instead. Like location 1 is connected to WordPress, but then location 2, 3, and 4 are on the funnels server. And then you can use the URL redirect feature to forward them to location 1, if that makes sense. I showed how URL redirects work, so you can use
does.
that.
Now here's the other weird question. I'm going to need the different like API keys from each sub account in GHL to be available. So like location 1, it's got 7 users in it, and I want to bring up their calendar information and their forms and all that are assigned to them by the location. Does that make sense? So in other words, when I go into my WordPress instance and I install a lead connector and I put the API key and all that in there, I can't do that for all 4, huh?
Yeah, because you can only install one plugin per site, so you cannot like.
So I just need 4. I'm trying to get it. These guys don't want 4 domains, and I'm just trying to figure out a way around that. They don't want 4 domains for their, their one brand.
Like different forms and calendars from different locations, you can still do that without using the plugin, right? You just go to WordPress, you create 4 pages over there for each location, and you can just copy the embed code and embed the respective locations form in the page. So you don't, I don't understand why you're using the plugin in there. It's just to point the funnel pages, right? So let's keep the plugin out of this. And you still embed, you don't need the API key either. All you need is the embed code for each form, and then just embed it on all of the pages. And then you don't even need like WordPress instances for this. You can just use the redirect feature and point it to.
I do need WordPress instances just because there's a specific plugin that it's a WordPress plugin. I need that functionality. That's for each of the 4 locations. That's why I was trying to accomplish it, but I think I have my answer now. Sorry, it was a little complicated.
No problem.
Yep.
Okay, Jeremy, would you, yeah, so guys, we're to the end of our webinar here. Thank you so much for coming, y'all. If you haven't already, please go ahead and fill out and join that survey link. But yeah, guys, we'll send out the recordings and everything. I'm super thankful for your time. Jeremy, any last thoughts? I know I took over there a little bit, but
No, it's okay. I will be sending a recap of this in about 24 hours. With in your email. So everything we discussed today, you guys will get a copy. And if you have any issues, please don't please don't hesitate to reach out to us in support. And we greatly appreciate any feedback that you guys can submit on the survey. Thank you, guys.